You've probably heard, Diana pulled a choker over her head and it got stuck on her forehead. There's one problem. That's physically impossible. That's why it's called a choker. The internet loves this story. Diana, fumbling with jewelry, accidentally creating fashion history through a happy accident. It's charming. It's relatable. It makes for a great 30-second video with millions of views. And it falls apart the moment you think about it for more than 3 seconds. So let's think about it. A choker measures 14 to 16 inches around. That's the whole point. It chokes. It sits snug against your neck, fitted like jewelry is supposed to fit when you call it by that name. Meanwhile, the average adult human head measures 21 to 23 inches at its widest point, the part where you'd need to pass jewelry over it. The skull. We're talking about a gap of 7 inches. 7 inches that don't stretch, don't flex, don't magically disappear because the story sounds cute on TikTok. You cannot pull a 14-inch circle over a 22-inch sphere. This isn't royal mystery requiring insider knowledge. This isn't speculation about what Diana was thinking. It's geometry. The kind you learned in middle school and then forgot because when would you ever need it? You need it now. But before we get deeper into why every version of this story you've heard is complete nonsense, we need to talk about the actual piece of jewelry at the center of this myth. Because understanding what this choker actually is, how it was made, why it was made that way, and who wore it before Diana ever touched it, tells you everything you need to know about why the viral story is physically impossible. And that means going back nearly a century, to a queen with a very unusual neck. Queen Mary, grandmother of Elizabeth II, great-great-grandmother of the current Prince George, possessed a physical trait that fashion illustrators might exaggerate, but photographs from the early 20th century confirm was genuinely striking. An unusually long, elegant neck. The kind of neck that changed what jewelry could do. The kind of canvas that invited excess. Born in 1867, reigning as queen consort from 1910 to 1936, Mary had both a voracious appetite for jewelry acquisition and the perfect physical attributes to display her treasures. Other women collected jewelry to possess it. Mary collected jewelry to wear it. And her neck made that possible in ways most people couldn't replicate. She knew exactly what she had, and she used it. The Cambridge emeralds trace their lineage through generations of royal women before ever touching Diana's skin. The stones themselves originated in the collection of Princess Augusta of Hesse, passing through the tangled inheritance lines of European royalty, the kind of provenance that requires charts and footnotes to follow properly, until they landed in Mary's possession in the early 20th century. These weren't just pretty green rocks. They were history made tangible, power you could clasp around your throat. Centuries of royal marriages and strategic alliances condensed into stones you could show off at state dinners. During the 1920s, at the height of the Art Deco movement, Queen Mary commissioned jewelers to incorporate the Cambridge emeralds into several dramatic pieces, reflecting the geometric, bold aesthetic of the era. Sharp lines, deliberate symmetry, the kind of jewelry that announced itself from across a ballroom. The choker that would eventually end up on Diana's forehead was among these creations, a band of pearls punctuated by emerald and diamond stations, designed to sit snugly against Mary's remarkable throat. The construction followed standard Art Deco jewelry-making principles, rigid settings for the stones, no wobble, no flex, no give. Pearl strands providing the band's structure. And here's the detail that demolishes the viral myth before we even get to measurements. A clasp mechanism at the back. This matters. Pay attention. Art Deco chokers weren't elastic bracelets you could stretch over your hand. They weren't adjustable chains you could resize on the fly. They were precision instruments of display, constructed with clasps precisely because the fitted design required a way to open the jewelry for wearing and close it to secure it in position. You opened it to put it on. You closed it to lock it in place. This is how you wear a piece of jewelry that's too small to fit over your head. Because it was designed to be too small to fit over your head. Because that's what a choker is. That's the definition of the category. A necklace that fits closely around the throat, secured by a clasp, sized for a neck and nothing larger. Hugh Roberts documented pieces like this in his scholarly work, The Queen's Diamonds. Roberts served as surveyor of the Queen's works of art before becoming director of the Royal Collection, credentials that take decades to accumulate, the kind of expertise that separates actual jewelry history from content creators discovering a Wikipedia article and calling it research. His work provides the academic foundation for understanding how pieces like the Cambridge Emerald Choker were constructed, how they moved through successive generations of the royal family, and why they function the way they function. This isn't gossip. It's scholarship. The clasps of the Art Deco period, bar clasps, box clasps, hook and eye closures, all required deliberate manipulation to open and close. You had to use your fingers, apply pressure. Line up components. These mechanisms did not accidentally release while positioned on someone's head. They did not spontaneously re-engage in convenient new locations. They worked exactly as designed, securing fitted jewelry around necks that the jewelry was sized to fit. Queen Mary wore her dramatic chokers throughout her long life, her exceptional neck providing the ideal display for pieces that might overwhelm a different wearer. Look at photographs from the era. The Cambridge Emerald Choker sat against her throat like it was painted there, demonstrating both the fitted nature of the design and the visual impact such pieces could achieve when the canvas matched the art. The emeralds caught light, the pearls gleamed against skin, and the clasp, that clasp that proves the viral story impossible, held everything exactly where Mary wanted it. Snug, secure, positioned precisely at the base of her throat where chokers are meant to sit. When Mary died in 1953, just weeks before her granddaughter Elizabeth's coronation, her jewelry collection passed into the broader royal holdings. The Cambridge Emerald Choker moved from activewear to storage, from a neck that showed it off to a vault that kept it safe. And then something interesting happened, or rather, something interesting didn't happen. Elizabeth II inherited not merely a crown, but a vast collection of jewelry accumulated over generations. Tiaras that could anchor a small boat, brooches worth more than houses, necklaces, bracelets, earrings, enough to accessorize every formal occasion for centuries without repetition. Among these treasures were Queen Mary's dramatic Art Deco chokers, including the Cambridge Emerald piece. Yet, flip through photographs of Elizabeth over the subsequent decades. She rarely wore these particular items. The Cambridge Emerald Choker sat in the vault, while Elizabeth selected other pieces for her state dinners, her diplomatic functions, her photographed moments of royal display. The explanation typically offered in royal commentary involves vague references to conservative taste, personal preference. The Queen simply didn't care for that style. Royal watchers love attributing everything to taste. It sounds sophisticated without requiring investigation. It avoids uncomfortable observations about bodies and proportion. It lets everyone be polite. But there's a simpler truth rooted in physical reality, one that explains far more than vague preferences ever could. Elizabeth II did not possess her grandmother's unusually long neck. This isn't criticism. It's observation. Elizabeth's proportions were more typical of the general population, which meant that chokers designed to take advantage of Queen Mary's distinctive canvas simply didn't translate well to Elizabeth's different physical attributes. A choker that sat elegantly against Mary's elongated neck might appear to crowd Elizabeth's shorter one, overwhelming rather than enhancing, making her look confined rather than adorned. creating the visual impression of constraint when jewelry is supposed to create the impression of enhancement. Jewelry works, or doesn't work, based on the body wearing it. This isn't mysterious. It's why people try things on before buying them. The Queen has unworn jewelry in her vault. Most people have uneaten beans in their cabinet. The scale differs dramatically. The Cambridge emeralds versus Hines, royal storage versus kitchen cupboard. But the principle of possessing things that don't quite suit your current circumstances? Universal. Rather than forcing pieces that didn't flatter her proportions, Elizabeth generally selected other options from her extensive collection. Brooches she could pin, necklaces that hit differently, tiaras that worked with her face shape. Certain of her grandmother's most dramatic chokers, including the Cambridge emerald piece, simply waited in storage, waiting for a wearer they might better suit. That waiting period lasted 30 years. July 1981. Charles, Prince of Wales, married Lady Diana Spencer in a ceremony that stopped traffic across multiple continents. 600,000 people lined the streets of London. 750 million watched on television worldwide. The dress had a 25-foot train. The wedding cake weighed 225 pounds. Everything about it screamed excess in the particular way that royal excess screams. Expensive, traditional, and calibrated for cameras. The wedding gifts were correspondingly extravagant. When you marry the heir to the throne, people don't give you toasters. Among the jewelry Diana received from the royal family was Queen Mary's Art Deco emerald and diamond choker, a piece that had sat largely unworn since its creator's death, finally meeting a neck that could display it as intended. Diana stood 5 feet 10 inches tall, slender, with proportions more reminiscent of Queen Mary than of Elizabeth II. She provided the canvas the choker had been waiting for. Diana wore it conventionally at first, around her neck, where chokers are designed to go, secured by that clasp that exists precisely because the piece cannot pass over a human skull. Photographs from the early 1980s show her with the Cambridge emeralds at her throat, the pearls sitting against her skin the way Mary's jewelers had intended when they constructed the piece 6 decades earlier. The choker did what chokers do. It fit. It stayed. It required a clasp to put on and take off. But Diana would find an even more unexpected use for the piece than anyone anticipated. Now we get to Melbourne, October 31st, 1985. Charles and Diana were deep into their second major tour of Australia, a grueling diplomatic schedule of appearances, handshakes, photo opportunities, and the peculiar performance art that constitutes royal duty abroad. City after city, event after event. Thousands of people waiting at every stop, hoping to catch a glimpse of the most photographed woman in the world. If you've never experienced a royal tour, imagine your most exhausting work week. Now add thousands of people staring at every outfit choice, photographers documenting every expression, protocol dictating where you stand, how you hold your hands, when you smile, how long you wave. Now do that for weeks, in a foreign country, while jet-lagged, while the press analyzes whether your marriage is failing based on how close you stood to your husband at a museum opening. The Australian itinerary brought them to Melbourne for a gala dinner at the Southern Cross Hotel. White tie, formal. The full weight of protocol expectations bearing down on every detail of preparation. This was not a casual event where you could improvise. This was not a charity luncheon where a nice dress would suffice. For a Princess of Wales attending a formal gala of this caliber, the dress code implicitly required appropriate headwear, a tiara, something sparkling positioned on the head to signal rank, status, and proper respect for the occasion. State dinners and formal galas traditionally called for women of sufficient rank to wear tiaras. Diana, as Princess of Wales, certainly qualified for the requirement. And royal protocol doesn't offer flexibility for showing up without the expected accessories. You don't explain to a room full of dignitaries that your jewelry didn't arrive. You find a solution. What happened next has been the subject of nearly 4 decades of discussion, misremembering, and eventually viral mythology that strayed ever further from physical reality with each retelling. Here's what we know for certain. Diana arrived at the Southern Cross Hotel wearing the Cambridge Emerald Choker, positioned across her forehead like an Art Deco bandeau. Photographs prove this. Multiple photographs, from multiple angles. There's no disputing what she wore or how she wore it. The question is how it got there, and that's where the internet went sideways. The most credible explanation, circulating among royal fashion enthusiasts and those who've examined the incident closely, suggests Diana's tiara was unavailable that evening, forgotten in the chaos of a packed tour schedule, packed in the wrong case among dozens of luggage pieces being shuttled between Australian cities, left at a previous stop on the exhausting itinerary, or otherwise inaccessible when the hour for dressing arrived. The exact circumstances remain undocumented in official accounts. Nobody published a palace statement reading, "The Princess of Wales regrets that her tiara was packed incorrectly." This is why intellectual honesty requires presenting the tiara theory as the most credible explanation rather than established fact. We're dealing with a wardrobe situation from 1985, not a criminal investigation with sworn testimony and forensic evidence. But here's the thing. We don't actually need to prove the tiara was forgotten to prove the viral story is garbage, because we have something better than speculation about what went wrong. We have first-hand testimony about what went right. Richard Dalton served as Princess Diana's hairstylist during this period of her life. Not a random salon employee who once touched royal hair, her personal hairstylist. Present for the intimate, private process of preparing a princess for public appearance. He was in that hotel room in Melbourne on October 31st, 1985, getting Diana ready for the gala. According to Dalton's accounts, given in interviews spanning decades since that night, with reporting as recently as October 2024 confirming his consistent story, he was responsible for solving the problem of how to create an appropriate headpiece from available materials. Listen to the language he uses. Attach. Figure out how. That's not the vocabulary of accident management. That's not someone describing a jewelry mishap they had to rescue from disaster. That's not, "Oh God, it's stuck. Help me get this off her head." That's the vocabulary of deliberate work. Intentional problem solving. Creative execution under time pressure. Dalton's task was to secure the Cambridge Emerald Choker to Diana's head in a way that would remain stable throughout an entire evening of movement, conversation, diplomatic obligations, and relentless photography. Think about what that actually requires. The piece wasn't designed for this purpose. There are no convenient attachment points built into a choker for securing it to hair. The weight distribution is completely wrong for a forehead piece. The emeralds and pearls want to slide, shift, fall. The clasp that fastens at the back would dig uncomfortably into Diana's skull if positioned incorrectly. The whole structure was engineered for throats, not foreheads. Making this work required skill with hair and accessories developed over years of professional training. Creativity in adapting a piece never designed for this purpose. Technical knowledge about weight distribution, balance points, and what would survive hours of wear. Understanding of Diana's specific hair texture, scalp shape, movement patterns. The choker had to be positioned across her forehead and secured into her hair, likely through a combination of a thin headband underneath, providing invisible structure, strategic hairpins woven through the pearl strands to anchor the piece, and careful positioning of the clasp to avoid either visible hardware or uncomfortable pressure points. Professional styling work. Executed under genuine time pressure, solving a real wardrobe crisis with available materials and accumulated expertise. This is what actually happened in that hotel room, not a slapstick comedy of jewelry getting stuck on someone's head. A professional team confronting an unexpected problem with skill, creativity, and the kind of calm under pressure that separates experts from amateurs. Diana emerged from that preparation room in a teal one-shoulder gown by designer Bruce Oldfield. The dress drew the eye upward along her collarbone, past her neck, to her face, and there, positioned across her forehead like an Art Deco bandeau from the 1920s, sat the Cambridge Emerald Choker. The photographer's flashes exploded. Nobody had seen anything like it, not in royal fashion, not in the hundreds of Diana photographs that had already circulated around the world. A piece of jewelry designed to circle a throat, instead circled a forehead. Queen Mary's choker, commissioned for one purpose, worn for decades in one position, repurposed as a headpiece for a princess born 3 years after Mary's death. The emeralds caught light differently at this angle. What had been a horizontal band across Diana's throat became a diagonal arc across her face, the green stones drawing attention to her eyes, framing her features instead of accenting her neck. The pearls that had sat against skin now sat against hair, creating a different texture, a different visual rhythm. It worked. Against every expectation for what you do with a choker, it worked. The image would become one of the most memorable fashion moments of the 20th century. You know the photograph, even if you don't remember where you first saw it. Diana in blue-green, looking slightly upward, the emeralds catching a camera flash, her smile suggesting she knows exactly what she's done. Unexpected, bold, striking enough to generate discussion for nearly 40 years. The evening proceeded. Diana worked the room as she always did, conversation, diplomacy, the careful navigation of personalities and egos that royal function requires. The emeralds caught light with each turn of her head. The improvised headpiece held perfectly throughout hours of standing, sitting, moving through crowds, posing for official photographs from every conceivable angle. Dalton's handiwork proved flawless. Whatever panic might have preceded the event, whatever rapid problem-solving occurred behind closed doors when someone realized the tiara wasn't available, none of it showed in the photographs. Diana appeared exactly as a Princess of Wales was expected to appear at such an event, properly accessorized for the occasion's formality, sparkling headpiece in place, protocol satisfied. Just not in the way anyone had anticipated. Now, let's get forensic about why the viral story is complete nonsense. The term choker itself provides the first clue. This isn't complicated etymology requiring specialized knowledge. A choker is defined by its close-fitting nature, designed to sit snugly against the neck. The name tells you what it does. It chokes, not literally strangling the wearer, but closely enough to evoke that sensation. Tight, fitted, snug. This design principle isn't optional for chokers. It's definitional. A choker that doesn't fit closely against the neck isn't a choker. It's a necklace, a pendant, something else entirely. The entire category exists because of that fitted characteristic. Standard choker measurements fall between 14 and 16 inches in total circumference, varying based on the wearer's neck size and the jeweler's specifications for how snugly the piece should sit. Not loosely draping, not with room to move. Fitted like a collar, sized for the body part they're named after. This fitted design is fundamental to the category. It's not a stylistic preference some jewelers choose and others ignore. It's the definition of what makes a choker a choker. A choker is not a loose pendant on a long chain that might swing around freely. It's not an adjustable piece you can resize on the fly. It's jewelry specifically constructed to sit closely against the throat, sized for exactly that purpose and nothing else. Now consider the adult human head. The average skull measures approximately 21 to 23 inches in circumference at its widest point. This measurement circles around the forehead and the back of the skull, exactly the path any jewelry would need to traverse to end up positioned on someone's forehead, whether accidentally or deliberately. 21 to 23 inches. Remember that number. The mathematics here are brutally simple. 14 to 16 inches cannot pass over 21 to 23 inches. This isn't close. This isn't a matter of, well, maybe if the choker was a bit loose that day, or perhaps Diana had an unusually small head. The gap between choker circumference and skull circumference spans 7 inches. 7 inches of physical impossibility. That gap does not stretch, does not flex, does not magically disappear because the story makes a good TikTok video, even accounting for maximum generosity and estimates. Imagining somehow the loosest possible choker that could still qualify as a choker, paired with the smallest adult skull that could still contain a brain, the geometry does not work. You cannot pass a smaller circle over a larger sphere. This is not royal conspiracy. It's not even contested fact. It's the same geometry that means you can't put your hat on by pulling it up through your neck. A choker cannot fit over a human head any more than a bracelet designed for a wrist can slip over an elbow. The physical dimensions are incompatible. The shapes don't match. Full stop. But let's pretend for a moment. Let's engage with the fantasy version of physics where materials behave however stories need them to behave. Even then, the clasp mechanism makes the impossibility definitive. Art Deco chokers like the Cambridge Emerald piece were constructed with clasps precisely because the fitted design required a way to open the jewelry for wearing and close it to secure it in position. Think about this for a second. Why do chokers have clasps? Why don't you just stretch them over your head like a sweater? Because the materials are rigid. Pearls don't stretch. Emeralds don't flex. Metal settings don't expand by 40% to accommodate skull passage and then contract back to neck size for wearing. These are rigid materials set in rigid configurations. The only way to put them on a body is to open them, position them, and close them. The clasp exists because stretching is impossible. Without a clasp, a choker would need to be elastic enough to stretch over the head and contract to fit the neck. Pearls would need to be rubber. Emeralds would need to be silly putty. Metal would need to behave like a scrunchie. None of these things are true. None of these things can become true because someone wants to make a viral video. Bar clasps of the 1920s required you to slide a bar through a loop and secure it in place. Box clasps required you to press a mechanism that clicked into a locked position. Hook and eye closures required manipulation of a small hook into its corresponding eye. All of these demanded deliberate human action using fingers and intention to open and close. They did not accidentally release while positioned on someone's head. They did not allow jewelry to magically traverse 7 inches of impossible skull passage. They did not spontaneously re-engage in picturesque new locations suitable for photography. They worked exactly as jewelers designed them to work. Opening when you needed to put the piece on, closing when you needed it to stay, remaining securely fastened until someone deliberately unfastened them. So what would the stuck narrative actually require to be physically possible? Let's walk through it step by step. First, the choker's clasp would have to have been open, because a closed 14-inch choker cannot pass over a 22-inch head. A closed circle smaller than the sphere it's supposedly passing over will stop at the point of contact. This is not advanced physics. This is putting on a necklace. Second, the jewelry would somehow have to have expanded by approximately 40% to pass over Diana's skull. Because even with an open clasp, you're not dealing with a continuous circle anymore. You're dealing with a strand of pearls and rigid emerald settings. That strand has a fixed length. It cannot stretch. The pearls are the size they are. The emeralds are mounted in the positions they're mounted. Third, After this impossible expansion occurred, the piece would have to have stopped conveniently at Diana's forehead, not continued sliding down to her chin, where gravity would naturally pull it, not fallen back to her neck, which is smaller than her skull. It would have had to stop and stay at exactly the visually optimal position for photography. Fourth, it would have to have stayed there all evening. Through hours of movement, conversation, diplomatic functions, and posing for photographs, without any visible means of attachment, without sliding, without falling, without Diana constantly adjusting a piece that wasn't secured to anything. None of this reflects how physical matter operates in the actual universe. Pearls do not stretch. They shatter under sufficient force, but they don't elongate. Emerald settings do not flex. They're metal surrounding stone, as rigid as the materials they're made from. Metal frames do not expand by 40% and contract again. Gravity doesn't conveniently pause to create fashion moments. A closed clasp cannot achieve positions it cannot physically reach. The viral story fails basic physics. It fails basic geometry. It fails basic understanding of jewelry construction. It fails basic logic. And Richard Dalton's testimony, the actual first-hand account of the person who was physically present in that hotel room, confirms what the physical evidence already proves. Dalton has never described managing a jewelry emergency, never talked about freeing an accidentally stuck choker, never mentioned pearls somehow wrapped around a skull they couldn't possibly have reached. Across decades of interviews, from the 1980s through to accounts reported in October 2024, he has consistently described the intentional styling work of securing the piece to Diana's head. Language of creative problem-solving, not accident response. Hairstylists don't attach jewelry that has gotten stuck. They remove it. They untangle it. They fix problems. If the choker had gotten stuck on Diana's head, Dalton's job would have been to get it off, not to secure it in position. His vocabulary across decades of consistent interviews describes deliberate execution of a styling solution, not damage control after a mishap. So where did this ridiculous story actually come from? Tracing exactly where the stuck-on-her-head myth originated proves frustratingly difficult, which itself tells us something important about its credibility. No contemporaneous account from 1985 describes the choker as having accidentally ended up on Diana's forehead. No newspaper article from the Australian tour mentions a jewelry mishap. No interview from that period references an accident. The myth appears to have emerged through the internet's endless game of telephone. Content recycling content, each retelling drifting slightly further from physical reality. Someone summarized the Melbourne incident incorrectly, perhaps imagining a more relatable narrative than "she deliberately and skillfully repurposed jewelry," and the charming version spread. Because it was charming. Not because it was accurate. Not because anyone checked whether it was physically possible. Not because evidence supported it. Just because it made a good story that people wanted to share. The stuck story persists partly because accidents feel more democratic than strategy. Think about what each version of the story implies. If Diana's most memorable fashion moment was happy coincidence, jewelry getting stuck and somehow looking amazing anyway, then perhaps anyone could stumble into similar iconic status with enough luck. You don't need skill. You don't need creativity. You don't need the kind of quick thinking that turns problems into opportunities. You just need fortune to smile on your mistakes. But if the moment resulted from quick thinking and deliberate creativity under pressure, that's different. That suggests a level of skill and confidence that challenges the listener. It requires admitting that you probably wouldn't have managed the same solution under similar circumstances. Most people faced with formal event in 90 minutes and no tiara would panic, call someone, make excuses, fake an illness. Diana found a solution and walked into that room like she'd planned it all along. The accident narrative flatters its audience. It implies that looking like Diana that night is something fortune might bestow on anyone, randomly, without preparation or ability. There's also something uncomfortable in the discourse about crediting Diana herself for the intelligence behind her image. The way people have talked about Diana, from the 1980s through her death and beyond, has always oscillated between two poles: fairy tale princess, tragic figure. In both versions, things happened to Diana rather than Diana making things happen. Circumstances shaped her. Luck blessed her. Tragedy befell her. She's described in passive voice even when she was actively making choices. The Stuck story fits this pattern perfectly. It makes her most famous accessory choice something that happened to her rather than something she achieved. It transforms deliberate brilliance into bumbling fortune. It takes away her credit and hands it to random chance. It denies her agency in creating her own image. But the Melbourne moment reveals something more interesting about Diana than luck. She assessed a problem. No tiara for a formal event requiring one. Limited time to solve it. Cameras waiting. Dignitaries expecting a properly accessorized princess. She identified available resources. The Cambridge Emerald Choker, designed for necks, but present in her jewelry case. A skilled hairstylist who'd worked with her before. Time, not much, but enough to try something. She conceived an unconventional solution. Wear it as a headband. Satisfy protocol requirements for a headpiece while making a statement no one anticipated. Turn a crisis into a moment. And she executed that solution. With help from Dalton, yes, collaboration, not solo performance. But she walked into that room. She faced those cameras. She maintained composure throughout an evening of photography and diplomatic obligations while wearing jewelry in a position it had never been designed to occupy. She made it look easy. This is strategic thinking under genuine pressure, the kind of creative problem-solving that requires both confidence and competence, the kind of decision that separates people who panic from people who pivot. Diana's fashion choices throughout her public life showed consistent evidence of exactly this kind of strategic intelligence. The revenge dress, the deliberate repetition of certain pieces at specific moments, the way she used clothing to comment on situations she couldn't address directly. She understood visual messaging in ways that sometimes frustrated more traditional royals who preferred their images controlled from above. Her choices about what to wear, when to wear it, and how it would photograph were not the accidents of a lucky woman who happened to look good in things. They were the choices of someone who understood her image as a form of communication, someone who wielded fashion deliberately, someone who knew exactly how that emerald headpiece would photograph and walked into the flashbulbs anyway. The Cambridge Emerald Choker could not have gotten stuck on Diana's forehead because chokers cannot fit over human skulls. The clasp exists specifically because the piece must be open to be worn. The mathematics of circumference eliminate the possibility. 14 cannot pass over 22. Richard Dalton's testimony describes intentional work, not accident management. Every piece of evidence points to the same conclusion. Diana was too smart for accidents to explain her. She turned a wardrobe crisis into the most memorable fashion moment of the decade through quick thinking and bold execution. She saw a problem that would have paralyzed most people, found an unconventional solution that had never occurred to anyone before, and had the confidence to walk into a room full of international photographers wearing jewelry in a way no one in royal history had ever worn it. And she pulled it off. The Stuck narrative diminishes her. It turns brilliance into bumbling, makes her most strategic moment seem like dumb luck, steals her credit and hands it to fortune. The truth restores her. You were right to be suspicious of that story. Every time you muttered at your screen that it didn't make sense. Every time someone shared that viral video and you thought, wait, that's not how jewelry works. Every time the logistics bothered you, even though you couldn't articulate exactly why. Chokers have clasps for a reason. 14 inches doesn't stretch to 22 inches. Jewelry doesn't accidentally position itself for optimal photography and stay there through hours of diplomatic functions. Diana didn't get lucky in Melbourne. She got creative. Subscribe for more stories like this.